In this video, I'm going to explain why I think LMND could be an absolutely dominant company of the future. I've been looking at their Q3 results and also doing a deep dive on the business, and I've initiated a position in this company. Now, what I'm going to do in today's video, which is my first video on LMND, is just explain an overview of LMND's business model. This will be the first video, but certainly not the last. So, when you're looking at companies that need to be adaptable in the 21st century, insurance companies have had it very good for a long time. I actually drew quite a lot of parallels between LMND in the insurance industry and HIMS in the healthcare industry. These are two sections of the economy that are very archaic, very large, but there's wide economic moats among the incumbent players, and they're relatively slow to change. Now, the insurance industry is an absolutely ridiculous sized industry. It's probably one of the largest, maybe if not for property, but one of the largest industries in the world, with an estimated TAM of $6 to $8 trillion. And LMND are planning to take a huge chunk out of that. And we're currently talking what is only a $5.5 billion company in market cap. But why do I think that this new player can come and disrupt all of these large legacy companies with huge amounts of resources? It's the same kind of story you see in a lot of industries. As I mentioned, you've got large legacy players in the US, names like Geico and State Farm, in the UK, Aviva, in Europe, Alliance. And these companies, because they're extremely old, a lot of their data is disconnected. However, an insurance company's greatest asset is their data. Now, what's extremely funny about today's model is still the legacy insurance companies, most of them use brokers, which is the way that it worked historically. Brokers that would create a market for insurance and try to get people the best deal. Now, the problem is that data is also a broker's greatest asset, right? So brokers do not generally sell or share their customer data with insurance. You can go onto a website like Zebra or Money Supermarket, as most of us do. These brokers will aggregate all of the deals and try to find the best one of those in the market. However, these brokers only share the most essential data with the insurers, i.e. the data that needs to be priced for a quote. And these insurance companies typically do not own the whole vertical. Even when they do, it's not only about the quality of data, but it's also about the way that you utilize that data in order to use modern technologies like artificial intelligence to improve outcomes for your customers. In both the US and the UK, between 60 and 90% of all insurance quotes still come through these brokers. So that is the default method of operation for these incumbent companies. LMND, however, take a different approach. This is a company that was founded by Daniel Schreiber back in 2015. And they said, look, the insurance industry is broken because these are companies that literally make actuarial decisions based off data. And the idea with insurance company is you optimize for profit where those quotes are priced fairly. So you don't overprice anybody because then they're paying too much, and thus you're not going to get any business because a cheaper competitor can come in and take that lower quote. But you also don't want to underprice somebody that may be higher risk or a higher rate of claim, because then you're just making a loss on that customer. So LMND, because they are a vertically integrated 21st century platform, that they say, look, we don't need brokers. We're not going to outsource any of that process. We're not going to outsource any of our claims process either. And we're going to have a simplistic AI first model that can analyze an infinitely better amount of data points in order to continuously train that data and drive insurance prices down for our customers while still making a profit at the same time. That is LMND fundamentally. And not only that, they can also lower costs massively by not having a lot of the legacy infrastructure, both tangible and intangible, that insurance companies have. The larger a company gets and the more solidified it is in its business, the trickier it is for it to be nimble and to transverse across to a modern way of doing things. And that's definitely what's happened in the legacy insurance industry. You know, for example, on one hand, they may have large headquarters, which are expensive to maintain, a lot of physical branches, and then on the software side, a lot of legacy systems with data sets that are not necessarily connected And Lemonade have done a fresh new approach where, because they were only founded in 2015, they could say, right, we're going to make a bet on artificial intelligence and the future, and we're going to aggregate every single little data point that we collect into an AI model in order to generate optimized insurance premiums for all of our customers. That'll be cheap premiums and it'll be less risky for us because we've actually priced each customer as effectively as we can. I quote from the CEO Daniel Schreiber on a podcast, "Mark my words, guys. In 5 years from now, we will not be known as the company with the most delightful app and the best PR, but they do have a delightful app, but the company that has the finest underwriting and pricing of insurance. There is not a single player who I would change data sets with." And that is a few years ago. So Lemonade are also now re-accelerating revenue growth and really proving an inflection point within their company. They started off as renters insurance, right? They have a young demographic, again, a demographic that have a digitally native way of doing things typically, and they want things done fast and efficient, etc. So most of their customers are under the age of 35, and you've got the same kind of expand model here as you do with SoFi. So they start off on renters insurance, and then as this cohort ages, their lives get more complicated and they require more types of insurance. So after renters, Lemonade did pet insurance. As you move into your 30s and settle down, you may want to start buying pets. After that, you may increase the number of vehicles that you have. If you have a family, you may have multiple vehicles, and Lemonade then got into car insurance. Car insurance alone in the United States is a 300 billion annual market. Lemonade's entire market cap right now is 5 billion. So this is the total addressable market of this thing. So it's instead of, oh, here's the lowest quote and we're going to waste all of our money on sales and marketing, it's you're picking the fruit from the tree. You're growing the tree up, growing with the customer, and then you help them by cross-selling them more and more efficiently priced insurance over time. And in fact, their car insurance segment, which is growing rapidly, 50% of those car insurance customers were already existing customers in a separate line of insurance with Lemonade. So you may want to know how Lemonade obtains more efficient data advantages and how it can cut costs at the same time. Well, as I mentioned, it's AI native and they have a few AI systems. One of them is AI Mayor. And I went on to lemonade.com as they've recently expanded into the UK. And I had a chat with AI Mayor, and it's very much like using a comprehensive chatbot. So traditional brokerages, which is how insurance companies get that data, again, they have no control over exactly what the brokerage sends them. The brokerage may ask 50 questions, but then only 25 of those questions apply for that specific insurance company's quote. The broker has no obligation for those other 25 questions to actually give that to the insurance company. When data and the way it's trained and getting that flywheel of, okay, we've got more data, we can more efficiently price our insurance, lower prices for customers, drive more value, obtain more customers, obtain more data, that is extremely valuable, and insurance companies are not capturing the full alpha of that. So when you sign up for insurance with AI Mayor, in effect, you have a chatbot that can talk to you dynamically. And what I mean by that is they're often asking relatively open-ended questions. It sounds like you're chatting to a human that knows you very well, but instead you're chatting to an AI. And it can detect the way you use language, for example, if there's any hesitancy. So for example, if it asks me if my roof was made of slate or concrete, someone that answers that very fast, that correlates with, oh, he 100% knows that his roof is made of slate. If there's a slight delay, then that can correlate with, oh, his roof is probably made of slate, but he's a little bit unsure. If the mouse moves between the two, he may be thinking, oh, my roof is made of concrete. Will I get a lower premium if it's made of slate? And then going on to another tab, maybe that, okay, I'm going to be deceitful. I'm Googling whether a roof made of slate or a roof made of concrete is going to give me a lower premium overall. And I do actually want to touch on this point as well about deceit, but I will come back to that later. So you sign up for insurance on AI Mayor. As I said, instead of a fixed survey, the AI is also artificially analyzing which types of questions it can ask certain types of people in order to obtain the most effective data. So they're picking up on every data point and constantly training the AI to optimize it. At the same time, their AI Gym does the same things on the claimant side. So when you make a claim, the AI can often approve that claim in seconds because there's enough data points to say, oh, there's an extremely high probability that that person is being truthful about the claim and it's a legitimate claim, and therefore we're going to pay out. Meanwhile, a lot of insurance companies, there's a massive counter incentive there, because you think about an insurance company, they make money between the spread of the premiums and then what they pay out. They invest that pool of money, they pay out the claims, and they pocket the difference, right? Lemonade does not do that. Lemonade takes a flat fee. The fee's about 25%. All of that money that's left over is then pooled into like a charity fund. Actually, Lemonade, what they do is they reinsure, other insurance companies invest the money or take on some of that risk. So Lemonade is de-risked, even though it's still purely Lemonade's claim. So it's still vertically integrated. But what happens is that money is pooled into a charity of the customer's choice. And what happens is if your claim is unsuccessful, then that money goes to charity. More importantly, if your claim is successful, obviously that money goes to you. But more importantly than that, if your claim is successful and you're being deceitful about an insurance claim, then you have effectively taken money off of a charity. And the reason why it's genius, as I mentioned earlier, is that there is no counter incentive. You know, insurance companies, number one, it typically takes them a long time to process claims because they do not have the same full AI stack that they've built from the ground up in 2015 that Lemonade built. However, what they do also have is a counter incentive. Sometimes, and I'm not saying all insurance companies do this all the time, sometimes there's an incentive for them to drag out the claim, for them to not focus on parts of the claim, because if they do not pay out, the insurance company makes the money. Lemonade, they take their 25% and then that's done. There's no counter incentive. And what that puts is it puts Lemonade on the same side as the customer. So Lemonade are not in a position of conflict of interest, which in the long run could result in them destroying their brand. Lemonade. So Lemonade has this amazing superior data advantage, both on the initial underwriting stage and also on the claim side. Granular data, how you respond, latency, honesty markers. The data is real time. So it's constantly refed into the AI. It's not batch uploaded. It's not disconnected because you've got a 200-year-old insurance company that's always behind the curve. And the reason why, because it's important to understand why a lot of them behind the curve, is that I'm not saying Lemonade is going to go out and destroy them all overnight. The total addressable market is just too big. The legacy insurance companies still have huge economic moats in the way they do things, and they're not going away anytime soon. Insurance as a principle and as a business model is not going away anytime soon. It's probably never going away, right? However, a lot of these insurance companies, because of their level of maturity, they're not incentivized to take the same sort of risks as Lemonade. If you think about the fact that most of them are tied to their brokerage firms and they have a long-standing relationship with those brokerage firms, if they started to move all of that business in-house, which would agitate the broker, because obviously the broker gets a commission if the insurance policy is sold, they could potentially destroy that whole relationship with the broker before their internal system is set up. So you've got a lot of damage to potentially be done here. Let's say, for example, an insurance company is overpricing claims. So you've got a customer who actually should be priced for less. Yes, you can price them for less, but if they're an existing customer, then there's going to be less money evolved onto the bottom line. And the way that a lot of legacy insurance companies think, I just don't think that they would actually see that as a positive in the long run, even though for a company with Lemonade's mentality, it might be, because you're driving better outcomes for customers, attracting more customers, and thus putting those customers in the AI data flywheel. Let's say, for example, as I mentioned earlier, if you were underpricing a customer and that customer was actually more risky, what's the incentive by raising the price of that customer if then that customer may switch? You're just making it more expensive for the customer. So it's very, very difficult. Like, the most important thing is to get accurate pricing and price all customers appropriately. That's where these companies will optimize in the long run. But because those insurance companies are still not utilizing the current technology we have in the most optimized way, a new company like Lemonade, who builds the insurance industry afresh from the ground up, is highly likely to take a huge amount of market share over time. The data advantage is particularly relevant in telematics, in car insurance. So I mentioned Lemonade are now expanding into car insurance, and that's very relevant because the amount of data points that you have there are absolutely insane. And there's only a fraction of current insurance companies that actually offer telematics, where you don't actually know what the risk of the driver is at all. The only data points a lot of conventional insurance companies have is the age and whether somebody's had an accident. But we all know that risk is individual. You might have a 17-year-old man who drives perfectly. Yes, on a generalized level, somebody that's been driving for a lot longer and has had no accidents is going to be safer. However, there are some 17-year-old men who drive like maniacs and some that don't. And this is the point, is that some of those premiums are massively overpriced and some are massively underpriced. And at the same time, the legacy insurance companies, because of the way they've already run things, they don't really have an incentive to either take on more risk or, on the flip side, annoy the underpriced customers because their premiums are going up. And at the same time, as I said, it's not like Lemonade is going to immediately bankrupt all of them just because of the size and the scale of the industry. And a further point as well is that because these are large legacy incumbent players, they're just not really incentivized to take that same risk. You look at companies, you look at insurance companies in the stock market, and they are typically mature, they're large, they pay out high dividends, they've had, a lot of CEOs, and they're not necessarily have the same risk culture that Lemonade has. So I believe that if Lemonade can continue to utilize their data in order to, number one, get closest to what the true premium of that customer should be through their risk profile, and number two, operate a digitally native, AI first, without all of these extra costs bloating the company down, they will be able to keep premiums extremely low for customers, drive more value for them over time, and compound themselves to capture a huge size of a multi-trillion-dollar market.